It's been clear over the years that a remake can either make or break a movie. On one hand, fans want the remake to stay true to the original and recapture the magic and nostalgia. On the other hand, because recapturing that magic and nostalgia is almost impossible, the audience expects new elements to be introduced, either to the characters or to the plot, in order to justify the remake's existence. So what's the deal with Disney's live remake of Mulan? Stick around to find out all the dirty details as compiled by Riveted. First, a bit of background. Hua Mulan was a Chinese warrior woman who lived during the Northern and Southern dynasties, which was between 420 and 589 CE, and her story was told through the ballad of the original poem. It's possible that she was a real person, but it is largely believed that her story is fictional. In the original poem, Hua Mulan is sitting at her loom as the men in her family are asked to defend China in the army. She doesn't want her old and sickly father to serve, and her brother's too young. She takes her father's place in the army with his blessing and that of her mother. In the original tale, Mulan was already a good fighter who had been trained in martial arts, sword fighting, and archery. She fought for 12 years and was offered an official post, but asked for only a camel to get back to her family, and when she puts on traditionally female clothing, her fellow soldiers realized that she had been a woman the entire time. The first known adaptation was in the 16th century by playwright Zhu Wei. In the adaptation, the heroine Mulan goes to war in her father's place as dramatized in several aspects of the original poem. In another version of the story, Sui Tang Romance, first released in 1695, Mulan only has sisters and a baby son, and Mulan takes her father Hua Hu's place in the army. The king's daughter is also a warrior named Jinang. She is thrilled to find out that Mulan is a woman who fights as well, and they become Leotong. Sadly, in this version of the story, the king is taken down, and the sisters surrender and offer to be put to death instead of the condemned men. They are not killed, however, and the emperor's mother gives Mulan money for her parents. Her father has died in her absence, and her mother has remarried. In the version, Mulan is ordered to become a concubine, so she kills herself. Several film adaptations of the story were later produced in the 1920s and 30s, the most successful being 1939's Mulan Joins the Army. Then Disney did their animated version and recently released the live remake. Mulan was released over Labor Day straight to the Disney Plus streaming service for $29.99, skipping a theatrical premiere. It's now available to rent or buy on a variety of digital platforms. Initial reactions to the film after its premiere in LA in March were largely positive, with critics calling it Disney's best live-action offering to date. And in an era where Hollywood is backing more Asian and Asian American stories, Mulan was notably the first Disney-branded film to feature an all-Asian cast. In the 2020 remake of Mulan, Disney took expectations one step further by promising a more culturally authentic and realistic version of Mulan's story. The new film still follows Mulan as she takes her father's place in the Chinese army, posing as a man, but the threat China faces is now the Rorans, led by Bori Khan and aided by an alienated witch possessing dark magic, rather than the 1998 movie's use of the Huns. Well, there were a bit of additions and omissions from the animated version that were both positive and negative. Mulan's creative team decided early on in Mulan's production process that they wouldn't be asking Yiffy or the rest of the cast to sing in the new version. Unlike the animated film, there aren't any songs performed within the movie. However, you may recognize the musical themes of songs like Honor to Us All, or dialogue that mirrors the lyrics of I'll Make a Man Out of You, but you'll see no one burst into song. When Mulan is being primped and dressed up to meet the matchmaker at the start of the film, an instrumental for Honor to Us All, the song that characters sing during this part of the animated film, can also be heard in the background. The instrumental for the song Reflection also appears several times throughout the movie as Mulan confronts her secret double life posing as a male soldier. At one point, she's literally looking at a reflection in a sword and then swells to a triumphant crescendo when she decides to fight as herself. The showrunner said they left out the singing because audiences didn't appreciate the lineup in the original movie, and they wanted this version to be more serious. Looking back at the original Mulan legend helps explain the criticism over certain stylistic choices in the film, such as the costume and the architecture. For instance, the architecture of Mulan's home in the movie, which appeared to be a tulo, a structure used as a communal residence by Hakka people in southern China and built from the 13th to the 20th centuries, does not align with the historical and geographical setting of the original folktale. Mulan's costume designer Bina Daigler said the Tang dynasty was the inspiration for the film's costumes, adding that the research included trips to European museums with Chinese departments and a 3-week visit to China. Her comments immediately sparked backlash on social media and beyond, with some highlighting the role of costume designer in particular as a missed opportunity to hire someone who is more of an expert on the culture to accurately reflect the story's origins. Despite promising to be more culturally authentic, Disney hired a white director, a white costume designer, 4 white screenwriters, a white composer, a white cinematographer, a white film editor, and a white casting director. Even the 1998 movie version had one female Asian writer. Instead of hiring Asians who actually grew up in the Chinese culture, Disney had the writers and designers do research in an attempt to soak up the culture, which led to a Chinese story with many Western elements and a lot of misused Chinese concepts. There was also backlash when Li Yifei, its principal star, voiced support for the Hong Kong police on social media during the height of last year's pro-democracy protests in the city, prompting calls to boycott the film. The Hong Kong police received intense criticism from the Hong Kong citizens due to their excessive force against peaceful protesters, journalists, and medics. This brutality is supported by the Chinese Communist Party, and Yifei is a supporter of the government. Had Mulan been released in 2019 around the time of Yifei's statements and during a time when movie theaters were open worldwide, it would almost certainly have taken a hit at the box office for this controversy. Well, her statement still had consequences. At the film's European premiere in central London in March, days before its release was postponed, masked protesters gathered outside the screening venue holding signs calling for a boycott and mocking up the film's promotional poster as an advert for the Hong Kong police. On the film's release in September, controversy and calls for a boycott intensified after viewers noted that the film's credits thanked municipal authorities in Xinjiang, where detention camps and human rights abusers of Uyghur Muslims have been well documented. More than 1 million Muslims in Xinjiang, mostly of the Uyghur minority, have been imprisoned in concentration camps. Some have been released and countless others have died. Forced sterilization campaigns have also caused the birth rate in Xinjiang to plummet roughly by 24% in 2019, and imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group fits within the legally recognized definition of genocide. There are plenty of other regions in China and countries around the world that offer the starkly beautiful mountain scenery present in the film, and in using the controversial area, Disney helped normalize a crime against humanity. Disney's president of film production, Sean Bailey, defended the decision to film in that area, saying that those scenes comprised 78 seconds of the final film. Bailey's statement came as a response to a letter of critique from Ian Duncan Smith, a member of the UK Parliament. Of course, fans were not buying the explanation, with many saying that while the film didn't have to be a recreation of the animated film, it could have been more authentic to the original Chinese ballad in a far more respectful way overall. It didn't hinge on ignoring human rights violations. Fans have also voiced concern over the various inaccuracies in the story. For starters, the Phoenix in the remake is the emissary of the Hua family's ancestry and is supposed to replace the character of Mushu as a more culturally authentic figure. However, the way that the Phoenix is used symbolically in the story is entirely Western. There are talks about how the Phoenix rises from ashes and amazing imagery of how Mulan was portrayed as the rising Phoenix. The concept of a Phoenix being reborn from flames is purely from Western legends and has nothing to do with phoenixes in Chinese legends. Also, one of the most notable ways Disney's live-action version of Mulan departs from the animated original is with the inclusion of a new villain, a dazzling witch named Xinjiang. Gong Li has the film's most interesting role and is a character with an interesting arc. The witch has an array of dark talents, including the power to possess other bodies and to shapeshift into various forms, including a flock of birds. She could easily destroy Mulan when she first meets her, but the witch becomes fixated on Mulan, drawn to her for more nuanced reasons that become unveiled over the course of the film. She becomes a villainous analog to Mulan, a woman who is similarly under the thumb of men and is struggling to ascend to her full potential. Because of that, she relates to Mulan and is continually drawn to her, even though they work for opposing camps. The character developed further when Gong agreed to play the part. The venerated Chinese actor, who starred in films like Farewell My Concubine and Memoirs of a Geisha, brought a new depth and gravitas to the role. Her shades of good and evil and the kinship she feels with Mulan show a depth that is otherwise missing from the proceedings. Xinjiang even pulls the old "we're not so different, you and I" bit that you can find in a lot of superhero films. Many fans felt that her inclusion was a waste of opportunity to emphasize on women empowerment. Xinjiang invites Mulan to join forces and rebel against the emperor. She wants to build a kingdom where strong women like them are accepted for who they are. But Mulan responds, "I know my place," emphasizing her duty is to serve her emperor. Ultimately, Xinjiang sacrifices herself to save Mulan, but rather than being a story of female empowerment, Mulan promotes the idea that women must put male authority figures before themselves to achieve recognition. Then, there's the misrepresentation of the Qi in the live remake. In the 1998 film, Mulan finds clever ways to overcome the limits of her strength in order to become a great warrior. Her character in the live-action movie has been completely altered so that she is naturally gifted. The movie implies that because she was born with such strong qi, she basically has supernatural abilities. From a Chinese cultural perspective, there are several problems with this. Qi is life force of energy flow, and although there is the Taoist belief that you can gain supernatural abilities by using qi, this is achieved by cultivating one's qi. These abilities are not something you are naturally gifted with. The only way to cultivate your qi is through hard work, which is an essential aspect of Chinese culture. Even though she does go through training, the movie still shows that Mulan is born special with particularly strong qi. The importance and role of the emperor in Chinese history was also clearly poorly researched. In one scene, the emperor, played by Jet Li, is interrupted during a discussion with his chancellor by a common soldier, which would have been a severe breach of protocol. When in the presence of the emperor, extreme deference to him was required in almost every imaginable aspect. Even walking normally before him would be seen as disrespectful. One was required to trot. In another scene, the emperor is challenged to a duel with the leader of the Rorons, and he actually accepts. According to ancient history, Chinese emperors did not, in general, have a place on the battlefield due to their importance in the central bureaucracy. All these misinterpretations and controversies have made fans want to say that the live remake was a beautiful disaster. Regardless, Mulan still ranked as one of the most popular movies in 57 countries by the end of October. So, what do you think, though? Was it a hit or a miss? Let us know in the comments section down below. This has been Riveted.